He's
I think he'll
got,
be here.
yeah.
Mhm.
Hey, Danny, it's good to see you.
Hey, how you doing, Greg?
Doing all right. You coming to the governance forum?
I am.
Awesome.
Look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah.
All right, I believe we're live.
All right. Well, as usual, we have a ton of things to get through. Is Meta on? I was hoping to do the technical updates first. It looks like.
She'll be here in just a moment.
Oh, okay, great. Well, I just have to say I am super excited about the governance forum. We have a lot of good things planned. I can't believe how fast this is all coming together. It's really, really, really cool.
It all zooms in on you.
And we had a lot of fun technical discussions over the last few weeks, and that was part of the reason why I wanted to do technical updates first. Meta.
I'm here. Sorry.
No worries. It's not a problem. We have a lot to talk about, but I wanted to lead off with the
Absolutely.
So let me hand it over to you, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, sounds great. Good morning, everyone. So lots to share on the technical front. We entered our sprints this week, and the team is making great progress. So I'll start with the compiler folks. So they are building their normalizer and sorting for row-lang terms, which is basically taking the row-lang terms and distilling it down into something that then can be compiled into simpler formats. And they were working on the RChain state specification on the blockchain. So that is in flight, but that really is a specification that brings it all together, right? What does the blockchain look? What are the messages that are being sent on the blockchain? What role consensus plays and how that interacts with the blockchain. So it's really about bringing all the low-level pieces together to seeing that high-level vision of what the RChain state on the blockchain is. That is in progress. So we are working on that and refining that, making super progress there. The team has really taken on a great culture of documentation. We are working on it, but we're getting much, much better. So you'll start seeing a lot more technical documentation popping up on the wiki. I myself am kind of leading the charge with, I'm going to write down what I know to be right, and you guys can fix me, correct me where I'm wrong. So that's been a great approach to kind of deal with some of the rubber meets the road, right? What are the individual contracts between the components and how they're going to interact with each other? Where does one component end and where does the other one begin? And what does that communication contract look like between the two of them? So how does the exchange of information and data happen at the low level? Lots of great work there. We're also stubbing out and building Casper in Rolang. So we're using the C++ VM. Kent implemented the tuple space in RBL, and we're using that flavor of Rosette to kind of stub out Casper and start building out the pieces that are well specified. So Michael Birch is making really excellent progress on that front. The Node team is making great progress. We have our initial Node API. We had to revise all of our build structures so that we can roll up all the components into a single top-level build. So there was a good amount of work there and a little bit of churn on the build side, but that's coming together very nicely. And we're working on implementing the monadic storage API and the tuple space in Scala, and then as well implementing matching in the storage layer. We have an open question on the matching functionality, and if we would like to use the matching and protobuf functionality as a generalized component that both communications, if we use the interpreter and the tuple space will all use a very standardized matching and serialization protobuf mechanism. So that's an open question that we have in terms of how these components fit together. What else can I tell you? 53 downloads of the SDK package as of yesterday, and we've got 2,000 unique visitors to the developer site till date. So the developer site is really doing great, and lots of interest in the Rolang tutorial. I've heard a lot from the community around developing educational content. If there are folks in the community that have experience developing educational content, please DM me, because myself and Lawrence, we're both working on reaching out to universities and setting up workshops for functional programming and a 3-day blockchain series with a focus on Rolang. But we need some help developing that curriculum. So if there are community members that have experience and expertise in developing educational curriculum, we'd love to get your feedback and contributions on helping us develop some educational curriculum for Rolang. That would be superb. And the Rosette team, they're working on supporting primitives that mutate VM state and trying to implement more opcodes. I'm a little concerned about the Rosette timeline. There is a roadmap page on the flight to Mercury, and the Rosette timeline, it looks like we'll be done with the transition function mid-May, which is a little late for my taste, because then we have to deal with all the RBL and the compiler pipeline after that, which, based on my estimates, looks like it pushes us out to August, which is really, really late. So we need to find a way to pull that in. That's my update. I'm going to open it up for questions if there's any questions.
Yeah, I need to. I'm going to be doing, I guess, a little bit more of a deep dive on the use of the proto buffs, but I'll do that with Kyle and Mike.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, yeah. I also agree with you that August is really, really late, considering all the other stuff that we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of like Kyle and Mike and Tim and I had a good conversation this morning and sort of laid out a few adjustments, which I think might help with the the schedule. So in particular, one of the things I think wasn't super clear, and I take responsibility for this. When we were developing Rosette, the whole idea was that Rosette was effectively a kind of coordination language, and that you'd push big chunks of functionality down sort of below the Rosette line. And in back in the day, that was pushing it down from Rosette to C++. um, so here it should be a little easier. So things like matching and tuple space functionality can all be pushed all the way down to Scala, right, and then poked through into Rosette as special purpose actors, and that should give us a leg up in terms of some of the development effort, right? We're not going to we get all the goodness of the Scala typing and all of our Scala expertise that we've hired for, rather than having to put it in effectively in the untyped intermediate language, which Rosette is. So hopefully some of those things help. Um, I know that there's kind of a some skunk works going on to develop an interpreter, and I want to. So we were kind of having really good engineering dialogue around whether or not we might pivot to the interpreter to make the deadlines, and I think uh, currently, I mean, we should keep taking the temperature of the room, but currently, I've argued that. While it is doable, and I've put production code in place that way, um, and that's effectively how we did BizTalk. It ends up we get a significant slowdown in terms of the performance of the execution of contracts, and but there's a huge. So you talked you touched on this idea of pedagogical materials. There is a huge advantage for pedagogy for the interpreter-based design pattern, and so I keep sort of supporting the idea that a side project interpreter to flesh out the design pattern is a really good idea, because then people who are interested can replicate that design pattern for their favorite language, whether it's Python or JavaScript or, God forbid, Ruby or, whatever it is, whatever their favorite language is, they can quickly replicate that design, the interpreter design pattern, and have a running version of Rolang um, up in their environment. And that may be one of the best ways for, especially for kids at the undergraduate level. I mean, I guess they're not really kids, but young people at the undergraduate level, getting started doing something like that might be a really good learning experience. So I would certainly recommend the work on the interpreter, uh, at least to be slotted for the kind of sample code or design pattern we could give to the community. I know that's not really a question, but just providing color and flavor to some of the things that you were saying.
Yes, absolutely. So the question will have to be, we're going to talk about the roadmap and what we're going to be able to do, what we can do to bring in the Rosette timeline vis-a-vis the interpreter, vis-a-vis the compiler, and who's going to work on what. So my intention is to have those conversations with Mike and Kyle and Kent and you and Nash
Yes.
when I see you all in person later today.
Yay. This is totally awesome. Yes, I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, I spoke with Kent, and yeah, we had a good long talk. I think one of the things that we need to do is also make sure that there's enough um, resourcing on the consensus side. I mean, Michael is certainly kicking ass, um, but there's a lot of moving parts here. Kent has expressed interest in running with the sharding stuff that we talked about. So I think that would nicely complement the work that Michael is doing.
Yes, he has been collaborating with Michael on the RChain state document. So yes, he has been helping with that piece. It's part of
Yeah.
his sprint goals as well.
Yeah, exactly.
sure.
Great. Yeah. So no, thank you for that technical update. I'm really pleased. I was telling the team, I have to pinch myself. It's like I get paid to do this. We get paid to have these kinds of engineering discussions. It's awesome.
It's a lot of fun. And so just so everybody knows, the technical team, if you're watching the pull requests on GitHub, we ran into a good and a bad situation last week where the continuous integration system, we couldn't get enough worker threads on Travis fast enough for the number of pull requests that were going through. That's a really great problem to have, right? So
Yes.
there's a lot of work happening in GitHub. You're seeing a lot of code commits going through, which is great.
Yeah, it's great. Kent's on now. Kent, we talked yesterday about maybe you were going to talk through a technical issue. Are you still up for that?
Yeah, that sounds good. So I guess what I wanted to present was what Mike and I have been working on, the RChain state that I just mentioned. Maybe, Mike, do you mind if I share screen on the doc?
No, go for it.
Okay. So can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay. So, and Mike, just feel free to butt in whenever. Okay. So this is like a rough sketch of what we've laid out so far. So it starts out generally, we are defining what the block is. And so here we have kind of defined what exactly that we want inside a block. And that includes the adding new code from par events and the com rewrite role. And we need the actual accounts storage, if that makes sense. So all the continuations and data that have been persisted over time are sort of part of this account storage. And so we were actually just on the topic of how we want it to. So we know what we want to store, but we got to figure out how exactly we want to store that. And the idea is we want to. So there's been talks about whether we want to actually reuse the Ethereum Merkle Patricia trie, but in either case, we need some kind of data structure that will be equivalent to a key value store. And so the idea here is that, if we do use the trie, then we can have the parse go into one trie, and then the com rewrites go into another. And so the parse will be effectively what people might have, or like, I guess, for those of you who are familiar with the blockchain space, are called transactions. And the com rewrite rules will be sort of equivalent to the receipts. And so those can be stored in two different tries, and then there will be a separate accounts trie which holds the storage of all the continuations and data that I've mentioned before. And one thing that I want to push to is to have that account storage, or like I'll just call it the state trie right now, to have this structure where all the top level, I'm going to call them names, should be flat, in the sense that you don't in Roland you can have a really complicated pattern to send a name on, or I mean to send data on. But if you do that, then, but that's not, I don't think that's necessary for top level accounts, if that makes sense. When you send to a contract, usually it's just a flat name. This is called the token contract. This is called the auction contract. We don't need to have this complicated structure there. So we can just have sort of flat keys to account storage, and then inside that account storage we'll have what we've been discussing is the channels to continuations or data. And so this is kind of splitting that account store into two levels. And yeah, that's kind of like the current direction. Again, this is really still fluid, so this is kind of a good place to speak up about it. And so yeah, that's the definition of a block that we have going. I'm going to skip over the Casper contract right now, but so what mostly the past couple days have been was concentrating on the Rev system contract. And so the Rev system contract is just one contract out of many that will be stored inside the block. And this is a privileged contract, but we are going to essentially just model it off of the ERC20 token contract. And this is really nice because we get all the, well, first of all, because a lot of people in the blockchain space are already familiar with this ERC20 token. And so, they'll know exactly what to expect from what this Rev system contract will do. And this is just running through it. The idea is that we are sort of going to pick on the EIP 101 proposal that Vitalik has written up and sort of put that into Roland terms. And so what we have here is that all accounts are going to be contracts, right? There's no notion of a sort of, I guess, an inherent token, if that makes sense. Like we will use revs for staking for Casper, and so in that sense it'll be privileged, but it's not written in any different way from like another token contract. And so the idea is that
that means therefore that it would be easy to kind of stamp out an alternative staking token.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so, yeah, just I guess since you've mentioned that, straight to that area, so the basic account contract, it essentially does things that recover based on your signature what address. So this proves, these two lines kind of prove that you own the public private key corresponding to this account. And, you check that, the nonce related thing. This is just to ensure that each transaction is unique. And then once you kind of pass those preconditions, you can actually move Rev tokens from your address or your account to another one. And so, yeah, on what Greg just mentioned about being able to swap out different tokens, when you pay for gas here, because of the way we've written this account contract, we can just swap it out for a different token. And so you can pay gas with, revs or a different token. And so, just to be clear, it's a different story whether the validator will accept your transaction. So if they see, you're paying for gas in some other token that has no value, then they might just be like, oh, well, I'm sorry, we're not supporting this, and drop your transaction. So, it's the safest. If you want your transaction to go through, as of, I guess, in the short term, it's probably best that you're paying with Rev. And actually the same here in terms of when you call to transfer. So this line right here is going to be, it says Rev contract, but that's because you're sending the transfer message to the 0 address. And so as I wrote here, the Rev contract is by default just going to be at the like the name 0. We can totally change that. I know maybe the nil or the 0 name might be used for something else. So, whatever name it's going to be, you just have to specify that, and that's what you're going to be transferring. So this is completely general in that sense. You can swap this 0 with the ERC20 token contract name of some other token, and then you'll be able to transfer tokens of that kind. And so, that's kind of in terms of token abstraction. And so, just the final piece is we also are abstracting away how users can actually withdraw, or the conditions that are required for a user to withdraw tokens. And, the current default is, they'll have to supply a ECDSA signature, and, from there you can recover an address that you can check against the value. And that's like I guess the basic way of checking. But you could easily replace this with a multi-sig contract, or, if you want, you can just do an anyone can withdraw contract, basically meaning, it'll just return true immediately, once you call into it, and then you'll be able to, go ahead and call the transfer function and whatnot. And so this is, we're trying to be really sort of lean in terms of the protocol details that, and we're trying to ensure that anyone can really come in and experiment with, different ideas.
No, this is great. I mean, so it's not just lean. It's also that the modularity, or the way you've factored the code. We've got a lot of the right kind of control points. It's often tricky with respect to factorization, where if you've got too many control points, then you spend a lot of time in configuration before you have anything that's running. If you have too few control points, then you don't have the right kind of system flexibility. But these seem to be very, very natural control points with respect to your factorization. So I'm very impressed, actually. I think this is quite nice. And in many ways, we get the benefit of 2020 hindsight, right? Ethereum did all the trailblazing. We get to go back.
Yeah. I was gonna butt in, like, don't give me or give Mike and I too much credit. Like, this is mostly Ethereum's work, and learning from, I guess, I don't know if I should call them mistakes, but like at least just learning through what they've gone through.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. No, it's very, very nice. I really appreciate you walking through this. And so basically with this work, one of the points I was trying to bring up with respect to staking is that now that we have kind of a straw man proposal with respect to multiple staking tokens, the only thing left is the argument about token dynamics. There's nothing left in terms of, can we engineer this in a way that it's reasonable to stamp out new staking tokens? Because it's obviously, it's clear that that the engineering is factored in such a way that we can stamp out new staking tokens. So really it comes down to the token dynamics and sort of the kind of policies that the co-op wants to support with respect to other staking tokens. So that's
Kent and Greg. Yeah, this is great work. Just had a couple of comments. Kent, when you were mentioning ERC20 like interfaces, that makes perfect sense for the token contract, but not the implementation side of it, because an ERC20 token contract in Ethereum keeps the entire ledger of what's the token and their balances in one contract, so that would not scale particularly well. But so there maybe need to be some lookup to the details of the balances or something like that. But the interface side makes sense. And
yeah.
then,
So
go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say it's really hard to, I guess, have something that's parallelized, because in essence this is like a global token, right? So I mean, we can split up the map into, I guess, shards, if you want to say that, but we'll always have to somehow be able to get the state of the whole map, and so it's,
well, you're actually you're tipping our hand, right? The reality is that in order to shard tokens in the way that Ed is talking about, that's where multiple staking really comes together.
Yeah, that's true.
So what you end up with to shard the token distribution information is you have to have multiple staking tokens, and then you use the multiple staking tokens and relative exchange rates and policies over the exchange rates to manage that piece of the sharding.
I'd like to talk more about this offline. I don't think that's the necessary conclusion, but
yeah. Well, I mean, if you have a sharded solution for the tokens, please, put that proposal in writing. Let's have the community talk about it.
Yeah. The two other things on this. One is the multiple signature types is really essential to support as early as possible.
Yep.
The iPhone, for example, has a separate digital cryptography curve than does Ethereum. But iPhones are probably the most deployed signing thing, or at least one of the most. The other thing I wanted that wasn't mentioned in this is earlier there was a commitment by the co-op in the board that there will be only one staking token for at least 6 months after release, and I hope that's still in place.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, it's a board resolution. We're going to maintain that. All I'm trying to do is to point out that I think there's a lot of there's a lot of fear around multiple staking tokens because they're looked at in a particular light, as if they're completely independent. But the reality is that when you get to a sharded solution, that sharded solution shares a lot in common with staking tokens. And so the staking token architecture that supports, or the sharding architecture, something that's going to support a scalable distribution or sharding of the account information, the distribution information, is going to look like the staking token architecture, a multiple staking token architecture. And really what glues it all together is how those tokens are related to each other. Otherwise, I don't know how to do it, but I'm all ears if there's an alternative proposal. If someone wants to put a practical, realizable proposal on the table that we can render to Rolang, love to talk about it. That would be great. But thank you, Ed. These are great. These are great questions.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, did you or Lawrence want to give an update on what's going on over at Pythia Incorporated?
Oh, yeah, I'll ask Lawrence too. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Ed. Yeah, we're just firing on all cylinders. We've completed most of our restructuring, so we can actually take investments in funds. The company wasn't set up this way. I did post to Discord the agreement between Co-op and Knee Holdings because it was asked for, and I think it's very appropriate for the community to see that. We're super excited with everything that we've got going on. We did the name change, and I'll be around tonight if anybody wants to ask, but pretty simply because with all of the partners, investors, and companies we've talked to, there's just a lot of questions or confusion of the difference between holdings, co-op, reflexive, who's doing what. So we thought a name change was a better way to address that, but still maintain the brand and use of the logo that we have. So we'll be Pythia, the RChain enablers. And you'll hear more about that. We're going to make some exciting announcements about our first investment working group on identity, which has got some of the top names in the identity world, as well as a stable coin that's just adopted RChain for its platform, and we'll announce that. And we're talking to a lot of investors, a couple in China. We're taking some time off for New Year's. And I'll keep it super brief this week and have more for you next week, and look forward to seeing a lot of you tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lawrence. That's an exciting update. Greg, are you still on?
I am here.
You want to give an update?
Sure. I don't want to steal too much of the thunder that we're going to have tomorrow, so we're excited to get in front of the group and talk about. It's funny. I'm sitting here making the deck as I speak to share with everybody tomorrow. So it's literally, I'm doing that right now. But no, we've got 3 or 4 great announcements that we'll be making tomorrow. We're super excited about it. The team is growing. We've added another team member that's coming out of the community, so I can't stress how thankful we are and how important the community is to us and how it's helping us grow in ways that we never saw, from an advisory perspective to deal flow to folks that are coming on board to work with us. Just been fantastic. So we couldn't be more excited about that. And then again, tomorrow you guys will hear a lot more about us. So I'm excited to meet you all as well. So I'll keep it short as well. There you go.
Well, thank you. One of the things that I really wanted to express my appreciation for is that with the deals that you have been crafting, you've come back to the co-op and said this is the shape of the deal. And like just today, I was talking with one of the founders about the token dynamics.
Yeah,
I was really, it was really a good conversation because in getting us involved, I had a great conversation with Peter Harris about how RChain Cooperative is managing the forward curve on the token value, because we have particular knobs and dials on the token value. In particular, we have the phlogiston rate, but also we have the dividends back to um, the RChain community based upon contract usage. And both of those things interact in this nice way that allow us to sort of help set policy around the value of the token that keeps it affordable and keeps the compute power of the platform affordable, because that's what it is, right? It's a global compute infrastructure, and we need it to be affordable. Otherwise, nobody's going to use it, right? I mean, we know what happens when transaction fees get too high. Well, nobody wants to run transactions on your network. Or for example, exchanges go out of business because the transaction fees make make it not viable to run an exchange. So keeping an eye on the token dynamics so that the platform does what it's supposed to do for the community is something that RChain has been thinking about from its inception. And so when I had that discussion with Peter Harris, is Peter on the call? He may be getting ready to come over. We have a meeting in a little bit, but he said, "Oh wow, these are exactly the kinds of token dynamic, long-term token dynamics that Resonate needs to be thinking about." So it was a substantive conversation. It was like co-op to co-op. How do you manage the token dynamics? And this was all sparked because Reflective got us involved early into the substantive nature of those deals, and I really appreciate that. I mean, thank you very much.
Our pleasure, and that happened, Greg, as you know, on two cases. So you really enlightened us on a deal that Steve's working on again that we will be announcing tomorrow, and to help us think through some of that. Obviously, you've been at this a lot longer than we have, so it's help like that, and it's help from some of the other guys on the marketing and our press release. I mean, all of this. It's really helpful. So thank you for that.
No, thank you. I think it's really good. And I think the other thing that I want to point out, and I think you pointed this out, is that there are a lot of really experienced people in the RChain community who can help with this. There are everyone, like Phil, I think is very experienced at this point. So feel free to tap into the collective intelligence of the RChain community.
I will, and I am, and I'm inviting it. Every time I have done it, we've been thankful. So I welcome one and all to track us down. There will be 5 of us there tomorrow and through the week. So find us, please. We would love it.
Awesome. Very good.
Okay.
Cool. So on to a few other things. Kenny, I think you had some interesting thoughts. I mean, do you want to begin to voice those now, or do you want to voice them at the governance forum? You had some. Go ahead.
On what?
We were talking about just sort of the nature of the RChain community hangout.
Yes. So we discussed a lot about the reason for RChain's existence, the reason why we're all here, because it's not about a price of a token. It's not about money per se. It's really about creating a technology that allows us to coordinate in ways we've never been able to coordinate before. That is way more important than just finance, right? But interestingly enough, finance is one of those kinds of technologies. So they do interplay quite heavily, and that's very important. And if you think about other types of coordinating technologies, I'm talking about things like language, the internet, written language, books. These things help our species do things together in a cooperative manner that can produce things that no one of us can produce on our own, or even in small bands like tribes, that sort of thing. So what we are building here is absolutely a coordination technology, and part of what this group intelligence requires is something like rhythm. Right. So if you're a musician or if you love to listen to music, you'll know that the rhythm of music allows for amazing complexity and coordination between many different uh, individuals. If you imagine a symphony or a large band of some kind, that's how they all do things in a certain way, right? And so when I was thinking about our community and this technology that we're trying to build, what is that heartbeat for us? What is that rhythm? Considering we have so many different platforms from which we can communicate. I speak to people on the phone, I text them, there's Discord, there's, so many different things. It's like, well, what's going
Telegram,
on?
GitHub.
Right. What's going on? And so I think it's really important that these meetings be the single source of what we might consider truth for our community and for the co-op and for anybody who's really wanting to know what's going on. And I think that is the case because it's regular. It has a rhythm to it. It's the same time every week, and you can still watch it if you can't make that particular moment in time. But it's important, and I've experienced this in other projects that I've worked on, that the coherency of a meeting like this is vital to the coordination of all of our efforts together. And I think so. I'd like to reiterate that to everyone here, that the people who come here, the people who watch these videos, consider yourself, the core of what this community is, and the things discussed and that happen here is the thing that we should take out to the rest of those channels. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. And Greg, please do feel free to add any additional context to that.
Well, I mean, I like the way you formulated it. Yeah, I think it's really important. I kind of think like in my own experience, I sort of have the three points that I check in on. Right, so I listen to my body, I listen to my head, and I listen to my heart. And like if one of them gets out of balance, I can use the other two to gang up on the third. So if I notice that all of my attention is in my head, then I can use my body and my heart to gang up on my head and get, rest my attention free from too much head centered experiencing. So I absolutely agree that this is kind of like the heartbeat. I think we probably need two other rhythmic events to make sure that we can triangulate, so to speak, on that. And but I love exactly what you're saying, and I think it's um, I think it's always important not to have just one source of truth, um, but having two or three of these kinds of rhythmic events, as you describe it, helps us, sanity check on any one of them, and but also be able to keep everything in alignment and everything in flow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and to Ian's point, how long has this meeting been on?
Oh, it's been going on since what, the 2014, 2000, early 2015, in some shape or form.
Which is incredible. That's really that's what's already what has been the consistent part of this entire endeavor.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yeah, and that's by design. Uh, 9/10 of any effort like this is just showing up again and again and again. So yeah, thank you very much. I thought it was really really useful commentary. Um, on to let's see, just check the time here. Oh well, okay. So the governance forum is I am so excited. Everything has lined up. The stars were with us. Um, because so far everything has been remarkably smooth. I've been very, very impressed by all the work that everyone has put in to pull this off. And I'm really looking forward to meeting people at the Mixer tonight and kicking off the forum and seeing how it unfolds beginning tomorrow. I hope that whoever's interested in some early morning Tai Chi will be willing to show up at 7:15 tomorrow morning at the venue, because it really it helps set the stage. It's one of these sort of radical coordination technologies that I'm going to challenge the community with.
Greg, I had a question about the Tai Chi. Sorry to interrupt. What if we're absolute noobs and know nothing about it?
That
would it
is
still be
such
okay?
absolutely. That's so. Being a rank beginner is such a privileged position. It's absolutely one of the best positions. I try to be a rank beginner as much as possible. So yes, it's open to all. It's for everyone, and that's going to be
Got it.
true of all of these sort of weird radical coordination technologies that people are going to be exposed to. Another one where I'm trying to give people an experience of an alternative coordination technology will be on Saturday morning. So the Seattle Circle, which is part of a much larger global community that was started by Robert Fripp, they will be introducing circular and orchestral techniques for self-organization. And I am going to encourage everyone to take whatever opportunity arises to participate, to get hands-on, to see what it's like to experience these circular and orchestral techniques for self-organizing. Because in many ways I have stolen unabashedly from the work that Robert gave to the community and that the community developed on its own. The Guitar Circle and Guitar Craft communities. I stole completely from that work in terms of helping to foster self-organization within the RChain community. So please, as much as possible, enjoy your position as a noob, as a rank beginner, and as often as possible, I encourage beginner's mind. One of the things that I say all the time about being a mathematician is that one of the most important things about being a mathematician is remaining professionally naive. Suspending all of one's expertise and opinion, and just looking at the math as simply and as plainly as possible.
I'll just grab my back.
Okay, so so that was a great question you had about the governance forum format. Do people have any other questions about the governance forum format? The agenda is out. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to see that. If they haven't, please let me know. But does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, good. I'll take the silence as golden. One thing I will say is that there will definitely be points where we explode the agenda. There are going to be some disruptive elements scattered throughout the agenda to help keep attention fresh and available to what's going on. There will be points where we introduce games to kind of disrupt the flow intentionally and change the qualitative nature of the attention we're bringing to bear on the whole process. So in some ways, the agenda is a lie. Because there's some points where we will intentionally just disrupt the agenda. Let's see. So, and let's see, we've covered everything. The couple of other updates with respect to LICA. So we're going to be coordinating with LICA to get some formal. Now that we've done the socialization and talked through the basic points where we can engage. We're going to formalize those agreements. So we're getting that started. We've also, the co-op has done some, we're executing agreements with a CoinMe and Cumberland Mining Company to be able to bring our liquid assets into alignment with the board resolution. So currently we are far shy of the distribution of assets that was set out by the board. And so we're going to be using these companies to help bring that back into alignment. And so if anyone has any questions about that, please let me know.
Hey, Greg,
yeah.
Step back for half a second. On Leica, which is an amazing thing, is Co-op looking for other markets to or exchanges to list on, or is it because of the technical deal?
Oh, okay. So let me clarify one point. So the co-op is not planning on listing rock except right at the end of the flight to Mercury, where we want to facilitate the swap from rock to rev. So it will be rev that's ultimately listed on exchanges, and for a brief period, the co-op will work with these exchanges to facilitate the rock. And I'm legally bound. It's my fiduciary and legal obligation to keep making this point as clear as possible to the community. We're not interested in listing rock on exchanges, and this is a part of our ongoing effort to make sure that the rock is not interpreted as a security, right? Because that's our position. But to the spirit of your question, as opposed to the letter, yes. So we are, as I understand it, Ed, am I correct that you're setting up a meeting with Bill Shihara from Bitrex?
Yeah, I haven't made any introductions, but ultimately we want, like your conversations with Lika, is we want to understand the requirements from an exchange perspective of running RChain nodes. And they struggle today. Bitrex, Poloniex, every major exchange struggles with the nodes and the stability for Bitcoin and Ethereum and others. So that's mainly the reason we're meeting with them, is to understand their requirements and what biz dev opportunities we can have in the future.
Right. So Ed, you and Bill met in June of last year, and I spoke with you from Paris about exactly this thing, and so that was kind of setting things up. And I told Bill that what the timelines would be, and I basically said around March we want to talk to you. March of 2018, we want to talk to you about getting our node software into your exchange. So the short answer to your question, Lawrence, is yes. We want to. There are a few exchanges that we want to target. One is to make sure that, like, most of these exchanges now have an API for nodes to be able to plug into their exchange. I know that Lika has one. I'm about 80 or 90% sure that Bitrex has one as well. And so we're feeding those documents back to Meta and the team to make sure that as they're designing the Node API, that Node API makes it easy to support these exchange APIs.
Can
I make a...
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Nathan.
I just want to express some concern over this sort of exchange talk. We should just be compliant with whatever the rules are, which seems to be zero talk of exchange.
No, that's not quite the rules. The rules are not zero talk of exchange. Well, the rules have to do with we are not promoting the listing of rock on exchanges, but the reality is that the exchanges will have to run our node software, and so this is what I've been talking about. And David Otto and all council are apprised of these conversations, and are very much in favor of what we're doing. So what we're doing is preparing for the nodes to run inside these exchanges, which has been the goal forever. All right, so when RChain nodes have to run inside these exchanges, and those are the first and best places to get pressure testing on the nodes. I mean, we can run all kinds of simulations, but the exchanges have actual market data that they can replay against our nodes, and that will put our nodes under pressure before we go live. And that's exactly what we need in order to have the kind of quality. Again, it's like, 2020 hindsight, right? I mean, Ethereum didn't get to have this advantage because there wasn't this kind of market data. There weren't these kinds of exchanges really when they launched. But now that everyone has launched, and we do have these exchanges, and we do have these, we can do transaction replays and all kinds of things to pressure test our nodes. That's exactly what we want, so that when we go live, we're in a much better position with respect to quality, and knowing that it just works. So that's number one. Number two, right at the tail end of the flight to Mercury, and when the network goes live, we have to facilitate the swap, and we don't want the co-op to be the party that does that. Rather, what we want to do is we want to enlist the support of a handful of exchanges to facilitate the swap from rock to rev, so that all rock holders will be able to go to an institution or offering that is convenient for them to be able to effect the swap. So this is not about getting the rock listed on exchanges for speculation. This is about working with the exchanges to facilitate what we have always promised the members of the co-op, that they will be able to swap their rock for rev on a one-to-one basis. Does that make sense?
Thank you for that clarity, Greg. So I get because I get calls from a lot of exchanges, especially in Asia. I'll let me know who to forward those to, and I'll facilitate the conversations.
You can forward them to me, and then I'll push it out to the folks that are helping out with this.
Yeah, thanks for the clarity there.
Sure.
I'd like to make a quick announcement at the top. This is about the top of the hour. Anybody who uses BitMessage, there's been a vulnerability found in BitMessage. The devs are aware of it, and they're going to fix it. So just be very careful, because the code was looking for people's Electrum wallets and things like that. So just be careful using that.
Wow. Thank you, Christian. Really appreciate it. Okay, so I think we're, as Christian said, it's 11:58. We're at the top of the hour. Kind of wondering if there are any other topics people want to touch on.
Quick question, Greg. Yeah. You have I posted in the chat here that you talk about 4 C's, but I think there are 5 C's. Would you?
Okay, so tell me.
Completeness, compositionality, concurrency, complexity, and then correctness. This comes from the Epicenter podcast you guys just had.
Yeah, I mean, you can when you're talking about a model of computation, since we're talking about mathematical models, the correctness part is already implicit, so I never call that out. But when you're talking about correctness from the point of view of bringing to bear things like equational reasoning, which comes from bisimulation, or the Liskov substitutability principle, which when you realize it in the process algebra setting is the relationship between bisimulation and typing. So that's in that context, correctness could be considered a fifth C. And then I haven't come up with a C word for reflection, because that's really the piece that sets the row calculus apart from everything. Like if you just did the 4 C's, and then if you add your fifth, you could get everything with the pi calculus or the ambient calculus or the blue calculus or something like that. But then when you add in reflection, there's only one left standing, and that's the row calculus. Um, so I mean, you're right to point this out in a certain way. I try to keep the conversation to bite size because I could go on forever. That's why I limit it to 4 C's. But in essence, you're right.
Cool. Thanks.
Sure.
Can I please give a quick update on the active members status and what we've been doing this week?
Oh yes, of course. I'm sorry. Just kick me earlier in the call, and
I will. Thank you.
just say shut up, Greg.
I'll remember that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So just a couple of things. So there have been some good discussions about rewarding for work, and whether we should be rewarding based on time or the value that it brings to the community. So there's been good dialogue on GitHub, and again, what I spoke about last week, where we are looking at how valuable comments are, because I think everyone agrees that comments can really help contribute with providing feedback, but we should be conscious of people just commenting for the sake of commenting and not really providing any value. So good discussion there. We also spoke about the decision-making process that actually took up quite a big part of our meeting last week, which is really interesting. And this has been further discussed on GitHub as well. And of course, with the governance forum coming up, that will be a key topic of discussion. And then at the end of last week's meeting, there was a really good point made about ensuring the quality of translated documents. We're seeing a lot of documents and videos being translated more and more, which is great, because that means we can reach more people with different languages. But we also found that a lot of people, or that some of the people who have translated these documents just use Google Translate, which obviously, I think, as most of us know, isn't always the best tool for getting really clear translations. So we're looking at how we can make sure that everything's in high quality, looking at perhaps how we can get native speakers to sense check or just do the total translation of things as well. And then this week will be, so the meeting after this, which is our weekly meeting, we want to continue the conversation about how to reward for work. And there's going to be an update about payments. And let me have a look. And yeah, and probably just some other issues that some of the active members wanted to talk about. So it's been really good. Good discussion, good dialogue. So feel free to join the meeting after this one.
Thank you very much. Your comment about comments in the context of payment for value reminds me very much of Alexander Dumas, who, if I understand correctly, he published the Three Musketeers as a serial, and he was paid by the word. And so if you wonder why there are all these ridiculous conversations and other kind of verbiage in the Three Musketeers, it's because he was fattening it up in order to get a better paycheck for his writings. Paid by the word is probably not the right way to value comments. All right, thank you so much to everyone, and I am looking forward to seeing a lot of you tonight.